history nerds and historians. My name is Krystina, and this is Effed Up Mythology. This is where we talk about a little tidbit from mythology that's it's really fucked up and super fucked up. This one is a doozy. Yes, I did say mythology. I know it's been forever. The last time I did a myth was the Troy saga back in April, and I very nearly also almost put on a dress to escape to Scaros and avoid all of my responsibilities and obligations having to do with that podcast. But I didn't, because I knew deep down in my heart that Odysseus would have found me. And if you do not understand that reference, please go back and listen to my Troy series, because I worked so hard on it, okay? So when I was planning this episode, I was actually going to do a different myth, but my heart was just like not in it at all. And much like I said in the last episode, I am Marie Kondoing things that don't bring me joy just out of my life. But I still really wanted to do a myth. So instead of the one that I was planning, I decided to pick the most absurd myth that I could think of, which is the Norse myth called the Mead of Poetry, or the Mead of Poets, depending on the source. And as absurd as it is, it actually doesn't involve Loki at all. But what it does involve is murder and acts adjacent to cannibalism. And that is all I'm going to say about that. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and practice your oh good god, what the fuck faces. Have you ever wondered where poetry comes from? Why there are some people that can just write beautiful words that just like bring tears to your eyes, or like sing songs that just touch your soul and just portray like every emotion that you've ever felt? And then there are other people who, when they try to write poetry, it sounds like they defecated on the page. Well, the Norse have an explanation for that. So, long ago, so long ago that it was like nearly the dawn of time, the Vanir and the Aesir were fighting. The Aesir were the warriors, you know, like Odin, Thor, Frigg, Tyr, and the Vanir were described as softer. They made the earth burst with life and the flowers grow. They were in charge of magic and wisdom and commerce. These were the deities like Freya and her brother Freyr. But neither was better than the other. But they thought they were. So the two groups were just fighting mercilessly for years. But neither side could win because they both had what the other lacked. And they eventually realized that they couldn't survive without the other. You couldn't take joy in battle and conquering lands unless there were things on the land that make it worthwhile, you know, plentiful seas, fields that grow, magic in the world, and all that stuff. And you couldn't wage war without wisdom. So eventually the fighting stops, and the two groups of deities make a truce. And to symbolize this truth, each Aesir and Vanir spit into a vat and let it all mingle together. And then they have a feast. And after this like celebratory feast, Odin is like, you know, it's such a shame we can't do anything with all of our spit. Like, waste not, want not, right? And Freya was like, oh no, I can do something with that. Just hold on a second, close your eyes. And she reaches into the vat and makes a man. Like Dr. Frankenfurter. In this myth, we're going to call her Freya Furter. And she names this man Kvasir, who I just imagine looks like Rocky. And Odin is like, hey, new dude, what is up? And Kvasir is like, oh, hi, Odin Allfather. Odin is surprised that this newly made man knows who he is. And Kvasir is just like going around naming people. And then he starts reciting poems and making up new songs. And everyone questions like what he's doing. And every question that the gods ask, he has the answer to. He's like the robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, telling everyone that the meaning of life is 42, and then just like laughing when they can't figure out what exactly that means. Kvasir was smart and wise and artistic and fierce and knowledgeable about different war tactics, but also knowledgeable about fields and how to purify water and how to make things grow and magic and all of that. He combined everything of the gods and created this like perfect being who knew everything, but was also super creative as well. It was the perfect combination of left brain, right brain. And after a while of all of these deities asking him questions, Kvasir is like, all right, folks, well, it's been real, but I'm going to go. I'm going to go see the 9 worlds. I'm going to go see Midgard. There are questions that haven't been asked yet that I must answer. And one of them is like, but are you going to come back? And he says, of course I'll come back. There's the mystery of the net, after all, which needs to be entangled. And they're like, I'm sorry, what? And Kvasir just sort of smiles and leaves to allow everyone to just ponder this until he decides to come back. Spoiler, this myth is not going to solve the mystery of the net. It's not going to entangle that myth. That is a different myth altogether. So you will also sit and ponder that until I decide to eventually do that myth, or until you look it up yourself. So have fun with that. So Kvasir travels from village to village. He meets all kinds of people and he answers everyone's questions. And everyone loves Kvasir. He's teaching them how to like purify water, make fabric from plants. He's answering questions about unsolved crimes, like who stole this person's knife and why. And then this myth has been kind of like, okay, normal, understandable, not too weird for someone to make a man in a myth or anything like that. Not too weird to have like deities fighting and then coming together. We've talked about myths like that before. This is the turning point of where it starts to get real weird. So, and that all comes with the introduction of 2 elves. So there are these 2 dark elves, although sometimes they're referred to as dwarves, named Fjalar and Galar, who live in this like cave fortress thing by the sea. And Fjalar and Galar are magicians and alchemists and amazing builders. And just like Kvasir is obsessed with like answering these questions that have never been asked before, these 2 elves are obsessed with making things that have never been made before. And they hear that Kvasir is coming to a nearby village, and they have something that they want to ask him, and maybe some things that they want to make with his help, right? So after he answers everyone's question in the village, the dwarves, elves, things come and tell him, we have a question that we know has never been asked before. We are absolutely certain of this, but it's a question that like we don't want anyone else to hear. So why don't you come back to our place and we'll ask you more in private, okay? So they all go back to their like cave fortress thing by the sea. And Kvasir goes into their workshop and he has some questions. He hasn't been somewhere like this before. So he points to the corner and he's like, what are those? And they're like, they're vats for storing liquid. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And what's that over there? And the elves are like, that is a kettle used to warm up liquid and cook things. How do you not know what a vat and a kettle is? Like, really? How do you not know this? And you have to remember, like, Kvasir is essentially a baby, right? Like, he knows a lot of answers, but he doesn't know a lot of things, if that makes sense. And then Kvasir is like, wow, y'all got a lot of honey here. What are you doing with all the honey? And Galar is like, if you're as wise as they say you are, you'd know what we're going to ask you and what we're going to do with the honey. We wouldn't have to say anything if you're really as wise as they say you are. So I guess this is your test, right? And Kvasir sort of nods and resignedly says, well, I think if you were intelligent but also evil, then you would probably murder me, drain my blood into vats, and mix it with the honey and make mead with it. And then this mead would be the finest mead. It would not only intoxicate people, but they would have the very same wisdom that I have. That's where your mind goes to, because you're like, you could have just given them interior decorating advice, or you could have just told them like, oh yeah, you've got a lot of honey here, are you trying to make like a new beehive? Let me tell you how to make a new beehive. You could have done a myriad of things, and yet you teach them how to make blood mead. And if this was not something that they were thinking of beforehand, they're definitely fucking thinking about it now, right? Like, oh, that's where your mind goes. But apparently that's what the dwarves were thinking. Because Galler is like, yeah, you think we would do this if we were intelligent but also evil, and it just so happens that we are intelligent but also evil. And then they slit his throat and make mead with his blood. And when they drink it, they're full of poetry. And they laugh and laugh and laugh and recite poetry and laugh and... I told you this one was weird, and it just gets weirder. So the next day, the gods come to their cave, laboratory, fortress thing, and we're like, hey, have you seen Kvasir? Because the last time he was with anyone was with you two, and we haven't been able to find him since. And Fjalar and Galler are like, oh yeah, he died. Sorry. And the gods are like, what in the name of Loki's daughter happened? And Fjalar and Galler are like, well, you know, what happened was he came back to our cave. Welcome to our home. And he's sort of like waited. And then he realized that we're actually just like really dumb dwarves. And we couldn't ask him any questions because we're just so dumb being dwarves. And, yeah, I don't know what happened. He just choked on his own knowledge. It was a sight to behold. We do still have his corpse if you want it. We also don't know what something weird happened after he died. Where like all of his blood just like drained out of his body. We don't know what happened. Again, we don't know what happened. Also, we don't know how he got the like slit along his throat that would explain why there's no longer blood in his body. But you can have his corpse. We don't have any use for it anymore. I mean, we never had use for it. We don't have any use for his corpse. So you can take that with you if you want before it starts smelling up the place. We'd actually really appreciate it. That would really take some load off of our hand. Thanks. And then the gods just take the body back to Asgard and give him a funeral and just like go along with life. Now, to be fair, Kvasir is, he's created, but he is still like a deity of some sort, most likely immortal. So the hint in the myth does sort of say that like he's gone for now, but he'll be back. And then that's sort of hinting to later on, like the mystery of the net and everything like that. So back in the fortress cave thing by the sea, Fjalar and Galler have this mead, and they are not hiding that they have this. And people are coming to try and get some from them. And Fjalar and Galler happily share the mead with everyone named Fjalar and Galler. Like they don't share it at all. Actually, they're really selfish about it, and they sort of like laugh at people when they try and ask for it. So soon after, for some reason, Fjalar and Galler invite this giant named Gilling to their home. And while he's there, they're like, hey, why don't we go for a boat ride? And Gilling agrees, and they all get in the boat. But the unfortunate thing is that they didn't sort of like accommodate for the weight of the giant in their boat. And as they're sailing over some of these rocks that normally they can get over just fine, the boat is too deep into the water because of the extra weight, and it actually gets stuck on these rocks. And getting stuck on these rocks causes the boat to flip over, and they all fall out. And Fjalar and Galler are able to sort of like maneuver their way back to the boat and flip it over and get back in. And once they're in, they're like, where the fuck is Gilling? Hey, Gilling, swim back. What are you doing? And Gilling is like, help me. I can't swim. And Fjalar and Galler are like, well, that sucks. And then they watch as Gilling drowns. And then they just like go back to their cave fortress thing by the sea. And soon after, Gilling's wife, who doesn't have a name because this is mythology and she's a woman, she comes to them and is sort of just like, hey, have you seen my husband? Like, he was last seen here with you guys and I can't find him. And Galler is like, oh yeah, him. He died. And Gilling's wife just looks at them with shock and she starts crying. And Fjaller decides to helpfully, I guess, add that Gilling had drowned. But I think, like, left out the part where they just watched as he drowned and did nothing to help him. And understandably, Gilling's wife starts freaking out. She's sobbing. Her heart is broken. She's just, like, calling out for Gilling. And Galler is like, hey, could you just stop? Like, you're being very loud and you're just sort of like, you're just like harshing my mellow. We try to keep a very zen space here, you know, even when we're murdering people. So please just like inside voices, please, because, you know, it's a cave, it echoes. It's a lot. So could you just stop? Just quiet down a little bit. And surprisingly, this does not console Gilling's wife at all, and she starts crying louder. And Fjaller is like, would you feel better if we took you to the place where your husband died? And you could like see where he died, and we can sort of like explain to you a little bit more what happened. Would that make you feel better? And she stops crying and agrees that maybe that would make her feel a little bit better. And so they're like, okay, great. We just got to grab something real quick. Go ahead and stand right outside the door and we'll be right there. So Gilling's wife goes, she stands outside the door to wait for Fjaller and Galler. And then Galler goes to the roof of their cave fortress thing and drops a boulder on her head and kills her. Yeah. Like, and then Fjaller is like, oh, thank you. I was getting so tired of that noise that she was making, and I really didn't want to go back down to the lake. You know, I already got my steps in for today. I really didn't want to go all the way back down there. Like, fuck her for mourning her husband, right? But I must say, Fjaller and Galler were not heartless because they threw her body into the water where her husband drowned so they could be together again. And later, when they're drinking the magic blood mead, they write sagas in Gilling and his wife's honor that they scream from the roof of their fortress every night, and they're just living the life. And one day, Fjaller and Galler wake up hungover, which, to be fair, is their norm. But the room is like spinning and moving around a little bit more than it usually does. And they must have fallen asleep with all the candles lit because it is bright in there. And also they're like tangled up in their blankets. They like can't move their arms and their feet. It's really, really weird. Like, what did they do last night? And then as they're trying to sort of like figure this out as they're groggily waking up, someone dumps a whole bucket of cold water on them. And Fjaller and Galler wake up and realize that they're not actually in their room at all. They're in a boat. And in this boat is also a giant. And this giant is rowing them out into the middle of the water. And they're like, hey, Mr. Giant, who are you? And what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm Suttung. Gilling was my father, and Giantess No Name was my mother. I've heard that you've been screaming into the wind about how you killed them. And Galler is like, is this why we're tied up and on this boat? And Suttung says yes. And Fjaller is like, is it because you're taking us to a wonderful place where we'll just eat and drink and become really, really good friends? And Suttung is like, no, actually. And then he rows the boat over to the same rocks that overturned their boat with their father. And that led to Gilling's death. And he takes Fjaller and Galler and he puts them on the rocks. And Fjaller is like, are we having a picnic or something? Because, like, our hands are tied. We can't really eat anything if our hands are tied. Also, the tide is coming in. And if our hands and feet are tied, like, we won't be able to swim and we'll drown. So this is not convenient for us. This is not a place where we want to be right now. We're gonna drown. So you should probably take us out of the water. And Suttung is like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point. That's sense what's happening here. And then he just sits in the boat and watches as the tide starts to come in. And the dwarves are like, no, mercy, please. And he's like, y'all just sat in the boat and watched my father drown. And from the sagas that you told, it was a great time. So I really want to see what all the fun's about. And they're like, trust me, it's not fun. We actually have things that we can give you. And Suttung is like, I very much doubt that. I live in a castle and a palace in Jotunheim. So I don't think that there's anything you have that you can give me. So could you just be quiet? This water is like very serene and you're just ruining this whole experience for me because you're being very loud. So I know we're outside, but like inside voices, please. And Fjalar and Galler are like, we have the mead. We have the special mead. It's blood mead. It tastes much better than it sounds. We made it with the blood of Kvasir. Kvasir, he was this like god, super poetry, wisdom, cool dude. We killed him and we made mead with his blood, and we have it. We have 2 vats and a kettle, and it's yours. If you want it, you can have it. Just take us out of the water, because we would really very much like to not drown today. Please. Thank you. And Suttung is like, oh, well, that is something that I don't have in my palace. Sounds very interesting. Sounds like a unique drink. My mom and dad always told me to never make a decision on impulse and to just sort of, take my time and think about it. So I'm gonna ponder your offer. Just give me a few minutes, okay? And he sits there and thinks about it as the tide slowly comes in, and when it is literally to the point where the dwarves are gasping for breath, Suttung plucks them out of the water and is like, okay, I agree. You can give that to me. Brings them back to the cave, takes their mead, and then goes back to Jotunheim. And Fjalar and Galler, while they're happy that they didn't join Gilling and his wife, they take every opportunity to tell everyone how wronged they were by Suttung, because they are the victims in this situation. Okay? They did not deserve what happened to them in retaliation for the thing. Nope. They did not deserve it. And one day they're telling this story to someone, and Odin's ravens overhear it, which means that Odin hears it. And he was like, all right, well, I'm gonna head out. And he grabs his hat and his cloak and a whetstone and a drill called Ravi. And before he leaves, he tells Thor to build 3 large vats and place them by the gates of Asgard. So back at Suttung's house, sorry, just thinking about the myth to come. So back at Suttung's house, he had the mead put deep into the center of the mountain that I will not try to pronounce because I will make an idiot of myself. And in the center of this mountain of the name that I will not pronounce, he appointed his daughter Gunlid as the guard of it. And Odin knows this. But something that y'all need to know about Odin Allfather is that he plays the long game. Okay, he's an immortal. He's got time. He's not just going to do a heist and steal the mead back. He's going to take his time and infiltrate as much as possible and fuck up as much shit as he can, little by little. And here's the story of that. So, instead of going to Suttung's palace immediately, Odin goes to some farmland that's owned by Suttung's brother named Baugi. So Baugi has 9 people who he has enslaved, who are working with these giant scythes, and they're cutting the grass for hay. And Odin disguises himself and sort of sits down and has a snack and watches these 9 men. And when they take a break, he's like, wow, what did you do to make your master hate you so much, to give you such dull scythes? Oh, this is really, really bad. Are you being punished? And all the giants are like, what are you talking about? These are just fine. These work perfectly. And so Odin is like, no, here, give me one of the scythes. I'll show you how sharp they can actually be. And he takes this like super special whetstone that's created by the gods, and he sharpens one scythe and then shows them how sharp it is. And then he goes and he sharpens all the rest of them as well. And they are just like amazed that this whetstone was able to get these scythes so sharp. It's like the gods made this whetstone, right? So they ask him if they can buy it, and he's like, no, absolutely not. Y'all are enslaved. I'm not going to take your money for someone who's like already at a disadvantage. No, we're going to make this as fair as possible. So I just need you all to stand as close together as possible, and I'll throw it up in the air, and whoever catches it can keep it. So the giants all get close together, and he throws it up in the air, and the giants jump for it. And I don't know if they were just like too excited or too dumb or just like not thinking of it, but they didn't put their scythes down before they jumped, these super, super sharp scythes. And when they jumped with their scythes in their hand, they all kill each other. And Odin just like walks over their bodies, retrieves the whetstone that none of them had caught, and makes his way into Baugi's house. And he asks Baugi if he can stay the night. And Baugi asks him who he is. And Odin, who again was disguised, introduces himself as Bolverkr. And that's how he's going to be known for like pretty much the rest of this myth, okay? Bolverkr is Odin. And Baugi is like, Bolverkr? That's a terrible name. It means worker of terrible things. Like, why did your parents name you that? And Odin is like, no, my parents named me right. I am an absolute terror to my enemies, but my friends all really appreciate the work that I do. And so Baugi allows him to stay the night, and then Baugi apologizes if he's not a good host, because Bolverkr came to him on a really, really dark day, because the 9 people that he had enslaved murdered each other in the field. He had no idea why. It was too late in the seasons to get more workers because all the good ones had already been purchased by his brother. And Baugi was worried that he would like descend into financial ruin and despair, essentially, if he couldn't finish tending to his fields. And Bolverkr is like, oh my God, that's terrible. I can't believe that all 9 of your slaves killed each other. Like, that is awful. But I will say that silver lining of this terrible tragedy, it's good that I came here because I can actually do the work of 9 men. And I would happily help you out, but I do want a little bit in return. And Baugi does not believe him at all. And so Bolverkr is like, listen, okay, if I'm wrong and I can't do the work of 9 men, then you don't have to pay me. Okay, I'll just do the work. I'll do as much as I can, and then I'll move on with my life. But if I can do the work of 9 men, perhaps you can just give me a sip of this wonderful mead in return. We've heard all about it. There are whispers in all of the lands about this special mead that you all got from these 2 dwarves over in a cave, you know. And I just want to see if the rumors are true. And Baugi tells him that the rumors are true, that they do have this special mead. But Suttung has it, and he's locked it away in a mountain and has told Baugi that it's not his to give. But if Bolverkr is able to do the work of 9 men, then Baugi will do all that he can to try and get just a sip of this mead to Bolverkr. So Odin says that they have a deal, and not only does Bolverkr do the work of 9 men, but he does the work of 20 men. And when he's finished, Baugi is so happy that he's like, let's go immediately to Suttung's palace, and we're going to ask him for it. And so they go try to convince Suttung to give them the mead, and Suttung absolutely refuses and sends them away, and it's like, I would not share this with anybody, especially not some servant. Like, are you fucking kidding me? No. Leave my palace immediately. And as Baugi and Bolverkr are like walking back to Baugi's house, Bolverkr is like, wow, what a selfish asshat. You know, if he's not going to give it to us, we should just take it. I mean, it was a blood debt for your parents' death. It should be just as much yours as it is Suttung's. Why does Suttung get to bogart all of the mead, right? And Baugi agrees with him. So they climb up the mountain, And as they're climbing up, they start to hear singing in a certain spot, because remember, Gunlid is the one who's like guarding this mead, and there's like nothing else for her to do. So she's singing a song, they hear her, and they're like, okay, well, this is probably around the spot where the mead is. So they start drilling in. Bolverker gives this special drill, Rati, to Baugi and asks him, he's like, you're a giant. You're going to be able to get through much easier than I am. Go ahead and start drilling. So Baugi does so. And after a little bit, he pulls the drill out and is like, okay, I'm done. And so Bolverker looks into the hole and is like, interesting. I just learned 2 things. And the first thing is that we're not actually through the mountain yet. So you need to keep going and keep drilling. And Baugi is like, okay. So what's the second thing that you just learned? And Bolverker just ignores him. So Baugi kind of gets like a little annoyed by this and keeps drilling, and finally breaks through the mountain, like in its entirety. And as Bolverker is looking into the hole to make sure that it's fully drilled through, Baugi takes the drill and plunges it towards Bolverker's head, trying to kill him. And Bolverker then transforms into a snake and dodges the drill, and is like, the second thing that I knew when you lied to me about the hole being drilled is that you would betray me, and you're not going to betray me. And then in snake form, Odin slides through this tiny hole that Baugi just created into the mountain. And Baugi is like, that was not a worker looking for lodging at all. That was actually a super skilled magician. And I bet he's going to fuck up a lot of stuff in my brother's house. And that's not my problem. And then he just like tosses the drill off the mountain and goes back home. And indeed, Odin is about to fuck shit up in this mountain. So once Odin makes his way into the mountain as a snake, he then transforms himself into a giant, a very beautiful giant. And he approaches Gunlid, who is standing in front of a locked door where the meat is. And she's armed with this super sharp sword. And she's just singing to herself because, again, there's nothing else to do. But at least she has a name. So she's better than like 90% of women in mythology that aren't deities. And so Odin calls out to her. And it's just like a total fuckboy, okay? He's like, ooh, hello, sexy brave maiden, standing there at attention with your sword. Got me standing at attention, if you know what I mean. And she draws her sword and is like, no, I don't know what you mean. Who the fuck are you, and how the fuck did you get in here? And he's like, wait. I know that I deserve death for coming in here, but like, could you not, so I can just look at you? And she's like, what? No. I'm literally on guard here. My father put me here to protect the mead of poetry and kill anyone who tries to take it. And literally the only reason that you could be here is to take it. So no, prepare to die. Like, and Odin is like, no, girl, that's not the only reason. I'm Bolverker. Nice to meet you. And I just want you to know that I actually came here not to steal the mead of poetry, because why the fuck would I care about that when there are rumors that the most beautiful and brave and virtuous daughter of Suttung lives here? And I thought to myself, man, if the rumors are true, then it'll all be worth it if Gunlid just lets me look at her one time. So, like, that's why I came here. And Gunlid is like, oh, twirling her hair, like, was it worth it, Bolverker, who I'm about to kill the shit out of? And Bolverker is like, ooh, hold on, let me look. More than worth it. The rumors don't do you any justice. No poet or bard could ever write or recite the words to fully encapsulate your beauty. And now I'm okay with dying, if that's what my fate has come to. Because you, Gunlid, you are more beautiful than a glacier, or a mountain peak, or a field of fresh fallen snow at dawn as the sun glistens off of it. And Gunlid is blushing. And sort of like, you know, looking away a little bit. She's very flattered. And so Bulbaker asks if he can sit with her. And she nods, still blushing. And they eat and they drink. And they share a couple little small kisses. And Bulbaker is like, you know, actually, I can see the appeal of that mead. I wish I could just have one small sip so that I could write about your beauty. And the song would be so beautiful that whenever someone wants to compliment a woman's beauty, they'll sing the Song of Gunlid. And she was sufficiently seduced and was like, I mean, one small sip would probably be fine. And he's like, all I want is one small sip, but that's not all I want right now. And then they fuck. And afterwards, they're cuddling and kissing, and Bulbaker sighs mournfully, and Gunlid asks him what's wrong, and he's like, I just wish that I could sing songs about your lips and how soft they are and how much better they are than anyone else's, because I think that song would be a fucking banger. And Gunlid is like, yeah, that is a shame. I have really fucking nice lips. I think that they are my best feature. And Bulbaker is like, just one of many. Just one of many. But like, if I could take a sip of that mead, I just might be able to sing that song. And she was like, only a super small sip. Because my father would not be happy if he thought that I was giving away his mead to every good-looking stranger who penetrates this mountain. And that is a terrible way to talk about yourself, Gunlid. You are more than a mountain. I know that you are a giant, but do not reduce yourself to a mountain. Oh my God. So they're walking along the mountain towards where she keeps the mead, and she's sort of like giving him a tour, you know, of the place. She's like, well, here's the door that locks from the outside that my father uses to come visit me sometimes, and here's the window that opens a little bit so that they can hand me some food. I'm really well taken care of, you see. And he's like, I literally don't care about any of this. The only thing that I care about is you and your eyes and your hair and your lips and your touch. And she's like, you're so full of shit. You're just saying that. And there's like no way that you actually want me as much as you do. There's like no way that you'd want to fuck me again. And then they fuck again. And when they're done, Bulbaker literally starts weeping. And he starts asking Gunlid to just kill him. He's like taking her sword and is like, just kill me already, because I'll never be able to write a poem. I'll never be able to write a poem about how perfect you are, or how beautiful your voice is, or how you feel when I'm holding you. It's impossible to describe how perfect you are. And if I can't do that, if I can't write a poem about that, then I would just rather fucking die, okay? And Gunlid is like, yeah, I feel like writing a poem about how beautiful and wonderful I am would be really difficult, but like, we both know that that's not impossible. And Bulbaker asks again if he can maybe just have one small sip of mead of poetry, and she tells him that it would have to be the smallest of small sips, and he's like, girl, if you take me there, I can show you just how small of a sip I can take. Which is a weird flex, but okay. So she takes him to the mead, finally. And he steps forward. And she's like, just remember, like, take just, like, a really small sip. And then you can write your 3 poems about how beautiful I am, about how wonderful my lips are, and, you know, how much you like me. And he's like, yeah, of course. One small sip. That's all I'm going to take. And then he drinks all the mead. Both of the vats and the kettle, and just like these 3 large gulps. Now Gunlid realizes that she's been betrayed, and she attacks him, but he dodges her and then locks her in the room and runs away like a little bitch and turns himself into an eagle. And Gunlid, unsurprisingly, is not okay with this, and she's screaming with rage and probably heartbreak as well, because this guy like totally gaslit her. And her screams are so loud that it wakes up Suttung, who sees this eagle flying away and guesses what happened and also transforms into an eagle and chases Odin. So they make their way back to Asgard, and the gods watch as the eagles shoot across the sky, but Odin is faster, and once he gets to the gates of Asgard, he spits all of the mead into the vats that Thor made. The source material literally says, like a father bird bringing food to his children. It's delicious. But he also wet farted some of the mead into Suttung's face, which blinded Suttung, and he lost all of Odin's trail. So, yep, there you go. That's how poets are super good at poetry, because they've drank the blood mead of the Norse god Kvasir that was then vomited by Odin Allfather into vats that Thor made. And if that isn't poetry, then I don't know what is. But before we finish, I do have to add one other little thing. You know, we talked about how some people are gifted with the gift of poetry, but some people are they're just not. So the poetry of someone who is just terrible at writing poems and just sings awful songs. Well, it's said that those people drank from the other mead that no one ever wants to taste. The one from Odin's asshole. And you have my permission to tell them that next time. Thank you so much for listening today. If you like what you heard and want to hear more, please consider subscribing or leaving a review or joining my Patreon. And remember, friends, history may be watching you, so don't fuck it up, and don't drink the mead from Odin's asshole. If you're not good at poetry, that's okay. All right? Bye.